good art doesn't preach. You experience life, but yet, if the metaphysics is there, then it's going to preach on its own. I mean, as long as you're being honest and truthful, you're going to be, hopefully helping people grapple with these things, and they're going to see the truth through it.
There's just something about old Hollywood film noir. Imposing mobsters, foggy alleys, streetwise detectives, screeching tires, a femme fatale, and that feeling of being trapped in a crooked town. Howard Hawks' 1946 film The Big Sleep, starring Humphrey Bogart, is among the most famous of the genre. But there's also The Wrong Man, The Third Man, The Big Heat, The Maltese Falcon, A Lonely Place, Touch of Evil, Double Indemnity, The Asphalt Jungle. The list goes on and on. Many people still flock to these gritty stories, drawn in by the basic drama of sin and redemption. We enjoy the struggle of good guys versus bad guys, but far more intriguing are the gray areas. In this genre, we realize that humans are good but fallen, loved but resistant to love, free to choose the good, but too often hemmed in by one bad option after another. To see the dilemma of our own frail lives writ large on the big screen, albeit with bigger stakes and more extreme consequences, we come away hopeful that there may be a way through all the brokenness of life on earth. Add to the noir genre the plot element of the sacrament of reconciliation, and there we have the ultimate intrigue. What happens in the box simply lends itself well to fictional stories of murder, blackmail, and fraud. And when one character, namely the priest, has all-important knowledge that he may not divulge under any circumstances, the potential for memorable character development and riveting plot twists is high. One may think of Alfred Hitchcock's 1953 classic I Confess, which stars Montgomery Clift as a priest who gets accused of a crime whose real perpetrator he has heard confess it. Or more recently, in John Michael McDonagh's 2014 film Calvary, a priest played by Brendan Gleeson learns in the confessional about his own impending demise. As a worthy homage to the noir tradition of cinema and literature, and featuring first-hand knowledge of confession and of priestcraft in general, we have a new novel from Ignatius Press called Death in Black and White by Father Michael Brisson. A page-turner in which a priest does God's work in the updated urban and suburban jungles of fallen humanity, Death in Black and White explores themes of vocation, justice, loyalty, temptation, and of course, sin and redemption. It takes us inside the rectory and inside the mind and heart of a priest. But it also takes the priest out into the dangerous world where no one, not even a man in a collar, can entirely escape the flesh and the devil. Father Michael Brisson is a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, and he currently serves as counselor to the Superior General in Rome and heads their department for priestly life. Father Brisson spent several years working in the New York City area as a retreat master, spiritual director, and local director for Regnum Christi. His knowledge of cinema history is prodigious, and any fan of classic movies, crime drama, and mysteries, not to mention the subgenre of mysteries involving priests, will love his debut novel. It is my pleasure to welcome Father Michael Brisson to the podcast today. Father Michael Brisson, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Andrew.
Well, I'm really delighted to be talking to you today for many reasons, one of which is the book that we're discussing is a novel, and most of the time, my discussions with authors are with nonfiction works of theology or works of kind of commentary or whatever it may be. But today we're discussing a novel, and it's a novel I really enjoyed reading. And it's a page turner. It's really, really interesting. And I'm holding it up for our viewers so they can see the handsome cover, which conveys a lot, actually, because the book itself, for those who can see, it has a kind of old Hollywood film noir feel to it, which is very much what you're going to find when you open the book as well. Now, I want to get into kind of a lot of priesty stuff and churchy stuff that you get into in the book, but maybe we could start with the kind of the cinematic influence that you obviously have, that you put into writing the book. Just so many different references to, classic Hollywood films, whether it's The Big Sleep or Strangers on a Train or whatever it may be. So maybe we could start there.
Okay, sure. It was kind of an accident at first. I was, when I was writing the book, and I was thinking of, so I lived in New York for a while, and I'm a religious priest, but I worked a lot with diocesan priests. So the protagonist is a diocesan priest in New York. And I had been watching, I think when I first started writing, I had been watching Going My Way with Bing Crosby, which is a classic and a great, and the image of the priest in that movie is, I think it's everyone's kind of dream of what a good priest is, right? And so I kind of made a reference to Going My Way as himself, this priest seeing himself. And then all of a sudden I started, putting in little references here and there to classic movies, and it became a thing. And in fact, someone who read an early draft was like, hey, how come you're making all these references? And like, there's too many references. And so I doubled down and I made it like the leitmotif in the book, and which actually kind of gave it a unity, and gave it kind of a nice feel and an ambiance that I wanted to capture. And I think Catholics, not all, but a lot of Catholics tend to be nostalgic at times, and so there's a lot of great old Catholic imagery that can come out when you use that. So that was kind of where it came from. And I do like film. So, but not as much as my protagonist. I think he's seen a lot more movies than I have.
Yeah, I mean, your protagonist is a priest called Father Christopher Hart, and yeah. There's a part I pulled out here to read back to you where he says, or it's actually in the jacket of the book. It says, unrelentingly comparing his life to his favorite classic movies, Father Hart wishes he could just play the role of Father O'Malley from Going My Way, which you mentioned before, but he ends up playing a character more akin to Philip Marlowe in The Big Sleep. Yeah. Now, there's this whole kind of subgenre of crime drama, which is related to priests, whether it's Father Brown or you mentioned a number of these in the book. And I really love how you set up the story. It's gritty. It's got a lot of very worldly stuff in it, but it's ultimately about a priest, and in fact, not just one priest, but multiple priests. And indeed, you even dedicate your book to priests. So, I mean, obviously, you are a priest, so it makes sense that you would write a book about a priest. But at the same time, there does seem to be an appetite for that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think there's two things there. One is, I think you don't see a lot of fiction out there with, priest characters, especially written by a priest. So there's, they say, write what you know, right? So I know a lot about being a priest and what priest is like. I love my priesthood. I love being a priest. I love everything, what we do for ministry. So that hopefully comes through the page. But also, I work with priests. So my role now, when I lived in New York, I was a retreat master, spiritual director. I worked with Reagan Christie, but now I'm in Rome, and I have sort of a desk job. I'm on the general council for our religious order, working with the general director, and my role is to oversee our priests, the interior, the sort of community life and superiors and the happiness, holiness, healthiness of our priests. And so, in doing that, I see the very positive things and all the great things that priests do, but also what they suffer and what they go through internally. And a lot of my work is trying to help them so they don't have to suffer as much, and provide good community life, opportunities for renewal, for sabbatical, that sort of thing. So because my life is kind of immersed in that, it became very natural to write a book about a priest who has his struggles. And, he's a virtuous man, but even with his virtue flagged at times. and what's that like? And then sometimes the situations that priests are put in because of their role, especially confession is a big component of the book, and when the burden of the confessor, the having to carry the sins of other people in your heart, never being able to ever talk to anyone else about them, and sometimes you can hear some pretty difficult things, and you can't unload that anywhere except to God in the Eucharist, in the chapel. That's the only, which is is sufficient, but still it's a burden, and so and sometimes you wonder what should you do, and so that's kind of in the book as well.
Yeah, I really want to dive deep into the confession stuff in a moment, but maybe just dwelling on the character of Father Hart for just a minute longer. The thing that strikes me is that in a lot of TV shows or movies that feature priests, they're either kind of bumbling idiots, or they're really wicked, or they're just all these kind of types that the screenwriters sort of want them to fit into, I guess. And I really appreciate how you have a human being, a man who is a priest, as your main character. And as you say, not only does he have the burden of the confessional, but he genuinely wants to build Christian community. I mean, he believes so strongly that he's been put in this community for a reason, and he wants to build up his parish. And maybe I'll throw it back to you just with that, to tell us a little bit more about the richness of the character who's really striving to serve God that way.
Yeah, so and it comes out right in the beginning of the book, where he's made a pastor for the first time. He's always been the associate, and he loved being an associate. He wasn't in charge of anything. He didn't have the responsibility of taking care of the physical plant and all of that sort of thing, and paying the bills. He was out there with the people, and he loved that. But then he was asked to take a step up and to take over this parish, and now you're in charge. What are you going to do? And instead of shirking from that responsibility, he took it on and said, all right, well, if God's given me this mission, then I'm going to do my best. And this is going to be, and it was a sleepy parish, right? It's Westchester County. There's lots of little small parishes in Westchester County, New York. And so his goal was, well, let's make this a vibrant parish, and let's make people feel welcome here and grow in holiness. And so he tries things, and they don't all work. Sometimes he tries one particular thing, tries to bring in some help, somebody who's more charismatic than himself. And that was, that didn't really go as he expected. And that's part of the plot. I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, so his passion, and I see that with a lot of young priests, with hopefully old priests as well. We all, keeping the love alive, and we want to see things flourish. But we live in a world that is materialistic and difficult to deal with, and is used to instant demand through social media or what have you, and used to emotional and sentimental gratification. And when the church, the mass, the typical activities that you do at a parish don't give you that. Don't give you the initial or the immediate gratification. So how do you address culture like that? How do you fit in? How do you stay relevant? I think every pastor struggles with that, and some do it well, and some don't, and some give up, but some never give up, but they still can't figure out the way. And so you have a priest here who's just starting that journey. He's just trying to figure out what do I do here. And then also, I think the part of the message of the book is, while he's trying so many things, and he's trying to do it, he can kind of forget that he's not the one who really makes things happen. It's God, mm-hmm. Right? It's God's grace. It's the Holy Spirit who uses whatever we do. I mean, if we're really trying to be honest and faithful and do whatever we can to build the kingdom, we can relax in a way. We don't have to worry about, we have to be smart about it, but God's going to take care of making things grow. He's the one who's going to take care of his will. Like we try to do his will, he'll take care of making it happen wherever. I think about St. Paul a lot, who, all of his communities failed. St. Paul, I mean, they're no longer Christian. They're all mostly Muslim. Yet, there's 2 billion Christians in the world that read his letters. What God wanted, he was writing those letters to those little communities. And, no, he never thought that those letters would go beyond those communities, and all of a sudden, that's what everyone's feeding themselves spiritually off of. Yet those little communities that he started, that wasn't the point. The point was for him just to give himself, and I think that's also a message in the book.
Yeah, and St. Paul was shipwrecked and bitten by a snake and put in jail and all these things, and there we find a certain connection to Father Hart, who your protagonist, who he just wants to get on with things. He wants to try new things. He has a plan for how to bring. We won't give anything away, but how to bring a friend of his, a priest brother, into his ministry and help him. And one thing leads to another, and he just can't even believe the mess that he finds himself in, that has to do with what he hears in the confessional, which as you say, is an extraordinary thing because it's real. And it also happens to make an incredibly interesting plot device, to have a character who cannot say something that he knows, which, if he could say it, would have a big effect on a whole lot of other people, right? So, yeah. I was thinking of, Quinn, you refer, of course, to Hitchcock's movie I Confess, and there are a number of other movies that have this. But maybe just say something to us about confession. You've already started down that road a little bit, but just for you as a priest, obviously that's a huge burden to bear, and so just what was going through your mind when you were creating that particular aspect of your character, Father Hart?
Well, a couple of things. So one, I think there's anything that's secretive has a certain draw, right? There's a certain, what happens behind the confessional, right? So and like, what is a priest thinking and going through? And I think anyone who's not a regular who doesn't go to confession regularly, is scared to go to confession because they feel that the priest is going to judge them, or how could what's he going to think of me, and all of that. When in fact, most priests will tell you that there's not a lot of originality in sin. Most people, they tend to say the same things or very similar, and you're not going to shock a priest. I mean, you could say if you're hard to shock a priest. But for a priest, it's incredible to be able to say the words, "I absolve you." In fact, the original title for my book, which I changed later on, was "I absolve you," kind of playing on the "I confess." So because the penitent says, "I confess," the priest says, "I absolve you," and to be able to say that in the name of God, to you are forgiven and God loves you. But it's funny. I've done a lot of missions. So either we used to do missions actually in Manhattan, and they still do this, where during Holy Week I go down to a parish and just sit in the confessional. I mean, have young families out in the corners inviting people into the parish, and I'd sit there and they'd invite people to come to confession. You get people that hadn't been in 25, 30, 40 years, and they'd unburden themselves, and you could just almost see the burden lift off their shoulders. I mean, how beautiful. So as much as it's a burden to carry it and to listen to all that, it's much more gratifying and really outweighs the difficulty, just seeing people, feel God's love and feel redeemed and recognize that in a real palpable way. So and I think that's why it's a theme for me when I'm writing a book, or that book. One of the reasons why it's such a big theme is because for me it's a big theme. To be an agent of mercy, to shed God's mercy, to share God's mercy with as many people as possible, I think is just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I think a benefit of reading the book for people, and I think it really will appeal to people who aren't Catholic as well. I mean, it really is just a page-turning crime novel. But I also think it's just wonderful how you, as a priest, have the space in the course of your 360 pages or whatever to really clarify things about what confession is, what it isn't, what it does, its effect on a person. It's a wonderful theme that runs all the way through, and maybe here we could say something about this phenomenon that I had never heard about before, which is an important part of the plot. And again, we're not trying to give anything away because it really, that would be too bad for our readers. We're not trying to do that. But I am very curious about this white death and black death that you write about in the book. Could you tell our listeners about that?
Sure. So actually, it's the inciting incident, which is, that's a technical term. So the thing that kind of starts the story off really in the direction is that, Father Hart gets a phone call at night, and they're, it's someone says, I need, I've got a guy that needs last rites, and he's like, well, okay, give me give me the name of the hospital. I'll go to the room. I'll take care of it. He said, no, we'll pick you up. And he takes him, and things pursue. So this actually happened to a friend, a priest that I know. I met him years ago. He got a call, and that was what it was. And so we'll pick you up. And they take him to this farmhouse outside of the city. I'm not going to say the city. And he's brought to this farmhouse, and he's seeing there's like people, like there's like a guard out, it looks like a guard out front of the house, and they take him upstairs, and there's this kid. He's well, kid. He's probably like 18, and it turns out it's a mafia hit. They're going to kill him, but they're giving him the opportunity to go to confession so that he goes to heaven, because he saw he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, saw what he shouldn't have saw, and he's a liability. But it's just business, so we got to take him out. But they give him a chance to go to confession, so he goes to heaven. Now there's the opposite, and that's called the white death. So the black death is the opposite, where they catch someone in flagrante delicto, and kill them there somehow, and that supposedly would send the person to hell. So it's reminiscent of Shakespeare and Hamlet. Hamlet who didn't want to kill his uncle because he was in prayer and he was afraid that he would go to heaven if he was, But so apparently this is a mafia ritual. Now this was just one priest who told me this happened to him, and the next morning he received a little envelope, his stipend. And he was like, I don't know what to do with this. So I'll just give it to the poor, I guess. But he felt divided. Like, what do I do? Do I just do my job and continue on, or do I actually try to report that I was, and what can I say? Because I was there to hear a confession, and you can't talk about confession. I can say around confession, I can say like I was there and I was asked for confession. But so anyway, and that's the dilemma of the priest in this story. So he's and now changed obviously the location and all the setup, and even the person is not a kid; it's an adult who has a particular. Well, I won't give that away either. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So
it really fascinating. It raises the issue of things like superstition, we obviously believe in the efficacy of confession, but at the same time, the way that you depict it being sort of offered to this person is kind of not quite right? I mean, yeah. So I guess to what I was saying before, you have an opportunity within this kind of odd thing that happens in the plot to sort of clarify in these characters what confession really is and isn't.
Right, and that's important, I think, because people do. I was meeting with a former Catholic, wonderful man, friend of mine, who was convinced that the Catholic Church teaches that if on your deathbed there has to be a priest by your side, otherwise you're not going to go to heaven. Well, that's not exactly how it works. And there's such a thing as perfect contrition, and anyway, so. The book did give me a chance to clarify, but people think that that I can live a horrible life and go to confession, and then it's all cleared up, and then I'll go to heaven. Well, I mean, yes, you can live a horrible life and then convert and realize that you've been sinful, go to confession, and go to heaven through purgatory, after a good cleansing, but it's not magic. And I think that's what a lot of people think, that the sacraments are, that Catholics think that the sacraments are magical. If I receive the Eucharist, then I'm just going to become holy. If I go to confession, I mean, obviously those are the means to holiness. It's the fastest route to holiness is through the sacraments, bar none. But the interior disposition has to be there. I need to feel sorry for my sins, and I can't just wave a magic wand and then say, okay, I did what I need. I clicked all the boxes, I checked all the boxes, and I did what I needed to do. I think that's also a tendency for Catholics, because we have so much that's tangible. There's so many things that we can do to gain grace, and it's a way of Catholics showing that I want to participate. I want the grace. So I'm going to say the rosary. I'm going to go to adoration. I'm going to do these things. And there's a very good thing there, but there's a danger, which is it becomes about me doing and not God saving. And so it's a collaboration. It's me disposing myself, opening myself to God's grace, and allowing God to do that. And how do I do that? Well, by choosing to frequent the sacraments, by opening my soul to Him in the sacrament of confession, by admitting that I've failed or that I've done wrong, and allowing His grace to come in. That's different than I'm going to go say the right words, or I'm going to do the right thing, and then God will take care of things. So I do think that that's one of the aims. I shouldn't say that it's one of the aims. It all just kind of came out. I mean, I wrote the book. I wrote the book in my free times, and as I put myself in the shoes of this priest, and what would you do, and how would you deal with this, and making the right decisions, the wrong decisions, and then things just kind of developed and happened, and it gave me a little bit of a chance. I was very careful not to preach, and I think that's important because good art doesn't preach. You experience life, but yet, if the metaphysics is there, then it's going to preach on its own. I mean, as long as you're being honest and truthful, you're going to be hopefully helping people grapple with these things, and they're going to see the truth through it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense, and I'm really glad that you made that point, because your book is anything but a kind of just a kind of moralistic or preachy sort of a kind of stage upon which you can sort of put on a little play to tell people to go to confession. I mean, it's nothing like that at all. It's a really riveting crime drama, as I've said, and the way that you weave these devices in is actually just to the benefit of the drama. I mean, it really makes it more interesting to read. Something that I want to dwell on just for a few minutes is, I think you rightly in your book, you can't write a book, it seems to me, or make a movie about a Catholic priest, about the Catholic Church, that doesn't have something to do with the legacy of the abuse scandal. And it comes up in your book for sure. Now, something that occurred to me, maybe I'll just say this and throw it back to you, but something that occurred to me, one movie that you didn't refer to, I don't think, maybe you did, but is Martin Scorsese's movie, The Departed. And I was thinking about that movie in particular because the character, the Jack Nicholson character, the mobster, I mean, he very self-consciously understands himself as a kind of like wicked replacement for a church or for a clergy, a kind of clerical class that has kind of abdicated its moral standing because of the abuse scandal. So in other words, it's like when the church sort of sins in this egregious way, or members of the church, then it sort of opens itself up to this whole different this vacuum that can be filled by these kind of diabolical leaders instead. And you get a little bit of that in your book, I think. I mean, with the kind of the mob story coming through. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw it back to you and just ask you how you approach that question of sort of the legacy of the abuse scandal in the characters that you're painting for us.
Okay, good question. So, by the way, I love the Departed movie. I love that movie. I didn't reference it because it didn't occur to me, but also because it's older than it was made after 1960. So.
Too new, yeah. I thought that, yeah.
Yeah, so the abuse scandal in two ways. So one is it's an excuse for a lot of people. Like, I don't even go to church because they can't even live it. I mean, these priests can't even live the faith. So why should I? I mean, it can't be real. I mean, I think this is actually a very real temptation where people are like, I mean, he celebrates mass every day. He goes on retreats and he's with all these holy people. He went to seminary, and he went to seminary for what, 6-8 years. How, if he can't make it, how about me? And so there's that aspect, right? And then, because the church's credibility is worn, and because, so let me finish that point first. So there is something there, and there's a temptation. The truth is, of course, that the number of priests who have done those horrible things is minuscule as far as a percentage. One is terrible. Like if even one priest were to betray his priesthood, betray everything he stands for, is terrible. So great, agreed. But vast majority. I mean, they say that if the study came out that there was 5% of priests from 1940 until 1990 or whatever it was. I mean, it's very small comparatively. Okay, so not a good excuse. Most priests are good men and holy, and they've their flaws and their problems. Okay, and with their temperaments and their ways of being, like they're people, right? We are people. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it's really hurt the credibility of the church, because the church used to be able to have a moral voice, and so when the media and our own behavior betrays us, well, that voice just isn't there anymore. And so there's a part in the book where there's a concern about this, and so the priest, one of the priests in the book, gets treated very harshly because they think that he's done something like that. He's abused a child, and so and they're very quick to act on that, and he has like no recourse, or he feels he has no recourse, because they're responding to a real situation where the church is under a microscope, and anything that we don't do or we do is going to be examined very closely. And yes, it happens in all sectors of society, in public schools, in sports teams, and the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts are suffering, but the church is the one that stands up and says, "We know what the moral truth is, and yet you're not living it, right?" And so that's why we're under the microscope. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I just thought you handled it really well. Yeah, and again, we don't want to give anything away in the book, but it's really a tough thing to address, but must be. And the way that you show that it's both, something that the church has to live with, and it's going to be, it's going to be there, but then also those who wish to kind of further damage the church then can use that in some respects against members of the clergy again, and so it's just all part of this sort of, almost diabolical, concoction now that is just kind of out there, right? And therefore, I think very suitable for this film noir homage that you're trying to paint, right? It's not always pure black and pure white. It's not all. I mean, it's like it's such a mess, the world, and we're all just trying to navigate through it, right?
And not only are we trying to navigate through it, God brings good out of that. Mm-hmm. So it's a total mess, But yet, and that's when you get to the end of the book, you should feel like, yeah, but look what he did. He used the evil. He used the filth and he made, I can say this much. He made the priest get into the filth and find a soul and come out with that soul. Yeah. And that was God. That wasn't the priest. That wasn't just, he made it happen through all that mess. So.
Yeah, there's a line towards the end of the book where an older priest says, I'm going to read you this quote. He says, "That's the church, filled with saints and sinners, and most people are neither all that saintly nor all that sinnerly." That a word? He said. Which I just thought, and again, it comes towards the end of the book, and it really sums up a lot of what we see in the journey of the characters.
Yeah, and I kind of struggled with, you want to paint a figure that is someone you want to admire, right? You want to have someone who's virtuous, but he can't be. He needs to be flawed. You need to be able to identify with the person. I think sometimes I read some saints books and there's one I wanted to read a good book on Saint Francis de Sales. Just not too long ago, I picked up a book that I found and I started reading it. And it was like this panegyric to this person who was like, it was like a statue that belongs in a church. It wasn't a real human being. And I was like, I don't identify with this person that they're describing. I mean, Saint Francis de Sales, I'm sure, had, of course, he has all his virtues, but he had his flaws. He had a temper, supposedly, and I want to read about that. I want to read about how he overcame that, and that's the inspiration I want. And so I think in painting in this protagonist, I wanted to have his flaws all out there, but that he was able to work through them. So.
Yeah, I think lay people who pick up the book will be really relieved that a priest understand sin the way that you do. I have to tell you, it's not something to be wallowed in. It's, it's obviously we have to live with the consequences of it, but I mean, it's something to be faced and forgiven, and it can be healed.
Amen. Yeah, and God wants us. I mean, you have let's say you have a loved one that is suffering and that is an alcoholic or is for his own self-destructive behavior is just wallowing and you wish that they would just realize that they could get out of that. Well, God's like that with us, and we think that He's upset with us or he's because we're not good enough, he doesn't love us, and we have to kind of like get to this moral standard where we're behaving properly, and then He'll like us, and then maybe He'll love us later. On the contrary, He will love us. He loves us in everything, in our filth, in our sins, and no matter how bad the sin is. Of course, He wants us just like that loved one we want to see get out of alcoholism or whatever it is. He wants to see us get out of that. He's going to give us. He's going to put His hand out all the time, constantly, and it's just up for us to grab it, or at least to ask Him to maybe pull us out, even if we can't find the strength to reach out and grab His hand. Just ask Him to pick us up, please. And that's our God. He loves us that much.
Yeah. That comes through really strongly in the book. And, another thing that does too is, in addition to just the question of can I be forgiven for my sin, is, that one of the classic film noir tropes is the sense of being trapped. Like you're trapped in a city that you can't get out of or whatever, right? Like every alley contains a dead end. Like there's no way out. And, and the characters in this book experience that, to be sure, just like in the Hollywood movies that you refer to. But there again, God does ultimately give us a way out. I mean, there is always hope.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we feel that there's no way out. When we feel there's no way out, that's kind of the Lord saying, okay, who are you going to trust? You going to trust yourself?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to trust your ability to figure this out, or are you going to trust me? And He kind of forces us at times to say, I have nowhere else to go. There's no way out. I can't get out. And then He said, okay, here. And He opens the door.
Yeah.
And, oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that reminds me of something else I wanted to raise, coming back to kind of the priest element. I know that the priesthood can be lonely, to be sure. And in the book, Father Hart certainly has good friends who are priests, and he is navigating different, slightly complicated relationships with other priests and that sort of thing. But ultimately, he really faces this dilemma. Like, he not only has the burden of what he hears in confession, but like even among his brother priests, like who can he talk to? Who can he trust? Like, I'd imagine, I don't know. I can only imagine that comes from, not obviously nothing like the real life, the fictional circumstances that you put Father Hart in, but I can imagine even in the church, there's questions of, church politics and who's on this side and who's on that side and all that kind of thing. And, I wonder if that came through in the character.
Yeah, so I think that's I guess you find that everywhere. Some people see even in marriage there can be great solitude, depending. But for priests, it's difficult, I think, because oftentimes priests are stretched. There's one priest in a parish by himself, or maybe he has several parishes to take care of. I'm thinking of dioceses out west, for example, that they'll have a lot of terrain to cover, and they're by themselves. Now, most figure it out; like they get their friendships. They have priest support groups, and there's a lot of different ways out there. I think it was harder as the church transitioned from having 3 to 4 priests in a parish, especially in the big cities, to having just one. And so I think priests nowadays are figuring that out. I live in a community, so I'm blessed to have lots of great guys around me, and I don't have that issue. But some people do. I mean, even in their community, you don't identify with anyone who's there. Maybe in our case, we're international, so you can be in a place where you don't even speak the language, or you don't speak the same language as the others, or you struggle with that, and culturally you don't get along, and so it can be lonely. So there's always that danger of loneliness, and I think everyone's has to figure out how to deal with that. And it's through strong friends. You have to find friendships. You have to find people that you can be a support to, and that they can be a support to you. And it can't be with people you have a ministerial relationship with. I mean, you can't be like, spiritual director who all of a sudden tries to start finding his support in the spiritual directee. That's a bad, you can't go that direction, right? But it's a temptation, especially when you have no one else to listen to you. And that person is very kind, and they'd rather talk about you and your life than their own life. Well, then all of a sudden, you can. And this doesn't happen in the book, but just for the listeners. But that's a temptation, I think, for some. So I think loneliness is a part of, and there's a beauty in solitude, especially part of the vow or promise of celibacy for Brisson. You have to find God has to be number one. That relationship in prayer, in the sacraments, that is it. But you still need those human relationships. Like some are called to real isolation. Like a Carthusian, for example, has much more remote living. But most of us need the human contact.
Yeah, and maybe we can take this further and talk about prayer a little bit. Where in the novel, Father Hart, he says at one point that he's always had this rich prayer life, and that he's always experienced it as a conversation. That he's really always heard God speaking back to him, and he runs into a place, not giving anything away, but where he really sort of feels like the conversation has stopped on the other side. And and yet the wonderful, well, I mean, I suppose that there again, there's that's pertinent to any priest's life. But I think lay people would read the book and feel the same way, and just think, my goodness, what am I doing when I'm praying? Sometimes it feels so productive, and sometimes it feels so dry. And so it's all well and good for us to say to each other, oh well, just keep praying or whatever. But actually, to see it kind of depicted in fiction the way that you've done, I think probably will be really helpful. But again, not in a kind of ham-fisted kind of way, but in just a kind of a comforting way to read fiction and see that dilemma playing out in someone's life.
Yeah, and I think it does help that people have these experiences. They think they're the only ones. Well, I see. Father, he probably prays all the, like he's always in. I do an hour of meditation every morning, right? So I tell that to a spiritual directee, like, well, I'm not like, and someone said this to me, well, I'm not like you, where I can just, sit and contemplate the Lord for an hour perfectly, absorbed in prayer. And I'm like, well, I'm not every day perfectly absorbed in prayer. Like I get distracted too. And there are moments where the Lord literally, there's not like, you feel like he's just not there. And for me, it's always been, okay, that's where I need to go deeper. And I know he's asked, and I've learned his language. I've learned how he speaks to me, and I think he speaks to everybody differently, their own unique way. For me, it's if things are really dry, it's because there's something that I'm holding on to that I haven't let go of, and so I need to let go of that. And oftentimes, it's control over some aspect of my life. And I think our protagonist, he's at one point he's trying to control things too much, and so he's not going to hear God when that happens.
Yeah. There's a scene towards the end of the book where his attention is drawn to a crucifix, a particularly brutal crucifix. And, it's a really great scene. And I think readers will really touch them with the idea of the way in which a priest is called to be Christ for others, but the way in which we're all called to be Christ for others, I think.
Yes.
I wonder if was that scene based on a real crucifix that you had in your mind, or a real experience or a real conversation or something like that?
So I noticed that some crucifixes that I like that I've seen are from Spain happen to be very bloody. And like particularly bloody. And the Spanish do it really well. Can be very graphic. And I was thinking, and so this was actually, the idea came from a homily I gave for Palm Sunday about like, why the cross, why the crucifix, why did it have to be that way? I mean, if I were God, I would have done it differently. I would have come down and showed my, awesomeness and just made everyone see like I'm just, I'm God. So just now obey me and it'll be perfect. And he chooses not to do it that way. He chooses to just come down to the muck with us and allow himself to be tortured to a pulp. And I think we forget just how bloody it really was. And we're so used to our, beautiful, we look at a crucifix and say, isn't that beautiful? And it's not beautiful. I mean, to a way, in a degree, from a spiritual sense, it is beautiful, but aesthetically, it's not. It's a bloody corpse hung up there, and it's a dead guy, And when you delve into the reality of that, and you realize that he did that and what that really means, then that's when you start to, okay. So when I suffer, when I embrace my cross, and I don't avoid it, when I feel called to do something difficult and a challenge, and I don't like just go to my phone and start scrolling because I don't want to deal with that. I actually embrace that and go for it. I'm participating in the same thing that he did. And I think that's where, and so to answer your question, where did that idea come from? I think it's just all those reflections. A lot of the book is just lots of things that I've had going in my head, experiences that I've had. In fact, I think all the characters in the book are people somehow, they're not exactly the people I know, but some experience of that I've had with people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Maybe one more question on that line. Then there's a character in the book who turns out to sort of have an important role to play. It's a woman character, and she grew up in a Catholic family, but she's very, very much not into the church anymore. And there's a conversation where after the fact, the priest realizes that he's been kind of duped into having a fight, basically about faith, right? Whereas he's sort of and he's mad at himself. He's like, why did I take the bait? Why did I argue with her about faith and science or whatever? I mean, those are good arguments to have, right? But it was clearly more, there was more going on there, and ultimately, it was more of a pastoral opportunity than a theological debate opportunity. And I just thought that was a nice touch. I mean, I know that the scene itself has an important role to play in the plot, but I know that you must have conversations like that or that temptation, right? Yeah.
Well, and also, I mean, and I'm going to give away a little bit, just a little bit. He fails. Like he has this argument, and he doesn't convince her. And I mean, how often does that happen? So I've studied lots of theology, and I have a very close relative who doesn't believe and grew up in the faith and everything. And I'm like, I have all these arguments. And so when we go and we talk, he just asks 3 questions, and I can't answer them. And then all of a sudden, totally defeated, and like, how is this possible? Like, I'm a priest. I know my stuff, and I can't convince him. And so I think there's that. I think that's a common experience, and it's because it's not about that. It's not about convincing somebody. It's not about getting the arguments right and playing the chess match just right so you get them in check. It's about loving them and helping them. Just bring down the defenses and just realize their love too, and then they just need to correspond to that love if they would, and everything could be so much better for them.
Yeah, and Father Hart gets more than a few chances to redeem himself, and I would say, to the reader, the last couple pages, Father, are just really knocked me out, and really, give Father Hart the opportunity to show that the Lord has sort of given him a chance to redeem his failed conversations in the past. So I thought that was really terrific.
Good.
Yeah. Last thing, obviously, with all the movie references, it's a very cinematic feeling book. Any thoughts about making a screenplay out of it and making a movie?
Yeah, actually, a lot of people, everyone that I've talked to about the book says the same thing. It's like watching a movie. You should really make a movie out of this. Mm-hmm. So, I had a friend who's a screenwriter who actually helps make movies, who offered to do the screenplay. So now there's a big distance from having someone write a screenplay and getting a movie produced, made. There have been people. Yeah, I don't want to get too much. There's one person from Hollywood who did show interest because the day I'll tell you this much, the day I got notification from Ignatius that they were accepting the book to publish, it was also my birthday, which is very nice. I had dinner with this person. It was a director and a producer. And after screening a film, and we were talking, and a friend of mine whispered in his ear that I had written this book. He's like, "Oh, I'd love to make that movie. Now, just because someone says I'd love to make that movie doesn't mean they're actually going to do it. And it's not a personal friend of mine; it's a friend of a friend. And so anyway, but I can be hopeful, right? I can hope that maybe this will turn into something. So we'll see. God will take care of it, I suppose.
I think it would make a great movie, Father. I really hope that it comes together. The book is Death in Black and White, new out from Ignatius Press. And my guest today has been Father Michael Brisson. Thank you, Father, so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the time.